Hi, welcome to Buffzone, sponsored by Liquor Mart. My name is Kyle Ringo. This is Ryan Thorburn. We cover the University of Colorado Athletic Department for the Daily Camera newspaper. We're here talking about basketball this week. The men's basketball team is traveling to Los Angeles to play USC and the legendary UCLA Bruin program on Saturday. The Buffs are coming off a pretty exciting win at home in an electric atmosphere last week against Arizona. Ryan, what are your impressions of where this team is at and where it's headed?
Well, right now there are 6 teams in the Pac-12 which are, within a game of each other at the top of the standings in the loss column. CU is one of 4 teams with 2 losses. And obviously they're 5-0 at home, 0-2 on the road, and will have to make hay with 7 of their final 11 on the road. So I see CU as still an open book. We don't know how this story is going to end, but I can, safely say they're a dominant home team and that there are some very winnable road games out there for them starting this Thursday night at USC. The Trojans, thanks to NCAA sanctions and injuries and other problems, are 0-7 in the Pac-12. Utah and Arizona have 2 wins each, so the Trojans are clearly the worst team, clearly on the rebuilding mode, and I don't expect a lot of fans at this game. I think this is a must-win for CU if they're really serious about playing in the postseason this year.
Yeah, I mean, going to USC in its current state and losing would be a hit to an RPI that's already going to struggle in a year like this when the Pac-12 is down, and RPI is such a big factor in deciding who gets into the dance in March and who doesn't, as we saw last year when the Buffs were pretty much robbed of a chance to go to March Madness. I've been impressed over the past few weeks with Carlin Brown kind of coming into his own finally as a CU Buff and as a senior. Earlier in the year, I thought he was kind of hit and miss. He was definitely there for one game and then maybe not so much the next. And I've seen him, kind of emerge and become, I don't want to say he's the leader of this team, but he's definitely one of them now. And he's a guy you can count on night in and night out, and hit a big shot, obviously, last weekend. What are your impressions of Carlin? Yeah,
you weren't at the Arizona game. So I turned to tell you in the final minutes there that this is where we're going to find out who's the man for CU, who's going to take these shots at the end. And it was Carlin Brown hit what turned out to be the game-winning 3. Now, he missed another shot, in the final minute that could have given him a 3-point lead. But it was Carlin's shot that ultimately won the game, and then they had to, get the last stand on defense. So I think Carlin has emerged as the go-to guy, as the leader. And, he's an LA kid as well. We talk a lot about the freshman from Los Angeles, but this is kind of a neat story, Carlin, going back to LA. He was a star player at Martin Luther King High way back 5 years ago. Went to Utah, as we all know, and transferred to CU last year before they were committed to going to the Pac-12. He expected to go to Kansas and all these different places that he had never been. Now he gets to go home and play in front of his family. So that's kind of a neat deal. And I think Carlin has to step up as a leader now and show these guys what it's like to be a veteran player and a professional, type of road attitude this weekend. And I mean, let's face it, they need to go into that UCLA game thinking sweep and not feeling down as USC's maybe only win this year.
What's interesting to me about this team and this year in the new conferences, excuse me, in the past, the Buffs would go places in the Big 12, and you just pretty much knew they weren't going to win. I mean, Allen Fieldhouse playing the University of Kansas is example 1A, obviously. The Buffs didn't win there forever, and there isn't really that game in my mind in the Pac-12 this year for this team. The Buffs, I think, are capable of winning anywhere on the road and definitely at home against any team in this conference, and that's kind of exciting. It's interesting, I would imagine, as a beat writer, knowing that you're not just kind of going on the road to write another losing game story and come back to Boulder.
Yeah, it was very convenient in the Big 12 to start writing your Kansas game story at the hotel before you even went over to the arena. With the 8:30 start on Thursday night, it'd be nice to start writing. CU lost their X number consecutive road game and fill in the quotes afterward. But, I think this is definitely a good move for CU to the Pac-12, and not just because the Pac-12's down, but because of the recruiting, because of the balance with the traveling partners. It's just a really fair conference, and I think CU, a program that doesn't have, the tradition of Kansas and even Texas recently. I mean, they're on a pretty even playing field, I would say, in the Pac-12 going forward. In fact, I think they have an advantage with their home court and the travel of teams going to Utah and CU. I just think it's a great story for CU. The football program has a ways to go still, but they're on the right track. But I think basketball, and I've said this from day one, on the women's and men's side has the most to gain, because on the road it's just not the same. It's not the same kind of environment, and there's a lot of winnable games. And then you have the Coors Event Center when it's full. It's more of a Big 12 type atmosphere where teams are really struggling. So I think that's a great storyline and something that's really going to help these two programs.
Last thing before we go, the Buffs will be at UCLA on Saturday. What has happened to the UCLA program? I mean, when the Buffs joined the Pac-12, 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago now, when we wrote about the basketball angle of that, a lot of people compared the heavyweight in the Pac-12 as UCLA to the Big 12's heavyweight in Kansas and a few other teams obviously in the Big 12. But UCLA is definitely down right now and not the same program it once was, even just a few years ago. What do you think is happening there?
Well, I think it's mostly attrition. When you look at the Mountain West, which is having one of its best seasons ever, and you look at UNLV and New Mexico and some of their top teams, their star players are UCLA transfers. You look at what Ben Haaland expected to have coming back this year, two guys that left for the NBA early, didn't get drafted until the second round. I'm not even sure if they're on rosters at this point. So it's been attrition. They still have some very good players, some very big players. They just don't have as many of them as they're used to, and their chemistry's been thrown off by that. They kicked their best player, Reeves Nielsen, off a month and a half ago off the team for insubordination, and the chemistry is actually getting better now, but that he was, an SI cover boy regionally, so you lose a guy like that anywhere and it's going to do damage. So UCLA will be back, but they've just had the worst of these the transfer epidemic and the early NBA epidemic. They've been hit as hard as any team in the country, and that's why they are where they are. Unfortunately, or fortunately for them, maybe Pauley Pavilion is going through a renovation this year, so CU will actually be playing in the LA Sports Arena instead. I've always wanted to go to Pauley. I'll have to wait another year, I guess, but that could be another advantage for CU on this road trip. I mean, the UCLA students aren't driving over to the LA Sports Arena to watch this bad team play.
All right, we'll come back next week, and we'll be back to talk football recruiting and, another CU homestand.